books on Catholic preaching, Vatican documents on Catholic preaching, invariably are referring to the Sunday homily. And that only makes sense because the Sunday homily is at the Mass, which is on the Lord's Day. It is on the Mass to which Catholics are obliged to go. And the canon law, the law of the Church, 767, Article 2, says that the homily on a Sunday cannot be removed for any reason. There must be a homily on Sundays and on special feast days, holy days of obligation. However, the very next article in the canon says that homilies, although really are important and really nurture the faith, are not obligatory but recommended for daily Mass. And this is where questions can arise for a preacher, because there's a lot of guidance given to a preacher now, especially with the homiletic directory, on what is expected from them, what the Church wants from them in a Sunday Mass. But what about daily Mass? Is there a difference? Is there a difference in preparation? There's certainly a difference in the experience of between the daily Mass and the Sunday Mass, because a preacher has a whole week between Sunday Masses to prepare, but daily Masses are going day by day if that preacher is on his own. So what is the preacher to do, and how particularly is to a preacher prepare? Well, the first thing to keep in mind is that when we are talking about the outcomes, the final result of what it is that the preacher is preaching, a homily is a homily. And the homiletic directory, when it speaks about the characteristics and qualities of homily, is speaking as much about a daily homily as it is about a Sunday homily. So when it tells the preacher that the Church is looking for something which is fully rooted in Scripture, not just not making oblique references to Scripture, but fully rooted in Scripture, that it is something fully integrated with the liturgy, that it is something which is prophetic, meaning that it brings Scripture as a lens to the experienced and contemporary life of a targeted particular congregation right in front of them. When the homiletic directory tells us that the homily is to be conversational, they mean that as much for the daily homily as they mean for the Sunday homily. The question comes, however, with preparation. One interesting thing about this connection between the daily homily and the Sunday homily is that Bishop Uttner, in his marvelous book, Preaching Better, holds up the daily homily as something from which the Sunday homily can learn, that the daily homily can inform the Sunday homily. He's cautioning or suggesting or recommending that homilists don't consider the daily homily as a sort of simplified or dumbed down Sunday homily, which is so rich and has been fully prepared, and so the daily homily is not so rich and is not so fully prepared. He, in his book, he suggests that the daily homily, that the daily weekday homily has very interesting characteristics from which a preacher can learn when he prepares his Sunday homily. He says that weekday homilies almost always stay with one thought, probably because they're shorter. In other words, he says that the weekday homily is more focused, or generally speaking for most preachers, and the preachers can learn from that and bring that focus into their Sunday homily. He says that preachers, in preparing a weekday homily, think small rather than imagining that I have to fill a lot of time or a lot of space, and that same approach to the Sunday homily would also be valuable. He says in his book, this is chapter 20, that weekday homilies come right out of the readings, which is what the Church is asking for also from the Sunday homily. He continues, our faith shows through more easily in weekday homilies, he says. We are more reflective, more personal, probably because the small, familiar weekday Mass group provides a more homey setting. But then as well, we are called to preach in a personal way. I have posted another video about what does personal preaching mean, and the whole question about self-referencing. But we are meant to bring forth our conviction, bring forth our faith, bring forth an earnestness in the preaching that and that comes in an intimate way. That just because it's now a Sunday homily with a lot more people, that we do not sacrifice intimacy. Uh, he says that in weekdays homilies we sometimes will take risks and will be creative and try something new, and that he is advocating that we think about not simply repeating ourselves and doing the same thing over and over on Sunday homilies. In weekday homilies, he says, we are more apt now and then to involve the assembly in the homily, which can be done through direct address, which can be done through rhetorical questions and in other ways. There will be another video posted soon about conversational preaching and what that means and how do we also integrate the congregation into it. He says that the starts and the ends of weekday homilies are better because in a weekday homily, he says, we get right into it without a long beginning. In other words, we sacrifice the idea of an introduction. As I've mentioned in other videos, my own personal approach is that homilies don't have introductions, that they grow right out of everything that preceded it, from the entrance hymn and so on. And he says also that it ends very quickly without repeating or summarizing. It just hands right over into the rest of the liturgy. Again, a practice which he advises preachers to try to bring into their Sunday preaching. And he makes his last point. He says, on weekdays, we're not as concerned with, quote, he says, looking good. On Sundays, even more on feast days or big events, ego tends to enter into it more. I want people to be impressed by a good homily, and by trying to make it so, the homily usually becomes less heart to heart on the Sunday, and we wanted more heart to heart on a weekday homily. So he's advocating that the things that seem to happen in weekday homilies be a model or help inform us, or we can think about these things for Sunday homilies. And if we understand that the outcomes, the goal of a Sunday homily and a weekday homily are the same, then these characteristics from the homiletic directory and the things that Bishop Uttner is saying also come into play. But the real question that preachers raise about this, it's not so much the concern about what does the homily look like at the end. The main concern they have is preparation. After all, the homiletic directory, the various popes, Pope Benedict, Pope Francis, various documents from the Church, right from the Vatican Council onward, have all spoken about a long preparation, something in which the preacher is invested, which is not done in one day. I call that I call vertical preaching, but is done over a number of days, and they often speak about a week or several days through the week, that it is not all produced at once. And we have spoken in another video about moving from contemplo, a contemplative lectio divina way of looking at preparing scripture, moving to studeo, consulting the rich tradition of the church, and investing time in predico, which is how you're going to organize and so on. But can you do that with a daily homily? I mean, when you're doing that day by day, can you be preparing for a whole week the day for tomorrow's homily, and then you're at the same time a whole week for the homily the day after that? So what is the preacher to do? If the outcome is the same, but clearly the preparation is going to have to be different. Well, there are several possibilities. Now, what some preachers will do is simply wing it. They will go into the ambo and just preach off the cuff. They preach impromptu preaching. And some preachers are very good at that. They're very good at bringing their thinking, their thoughts together. They're very experienced, they're good orators, and it works for them. The question is, though, is that going to be the best that they can give to the congregation? And is that living up to what the church wants for the congregation? We do know that the church documents have spoken about the need for preparation whether or not it's a Sunday homily or a daily homily, but the need for some kind of invested, dedicated preparation, which is giving the time for the Spirit to work within the preacher, and a time for the preacher to contribute his experience, his time, his studies, to his talents to the development of the homily. In 1999, the Congregation for the Clergy published a document called The Priest and the Third Christian Millennium, Teacher of the Word, Minister of the Sacraments, and Leader of the Community. And in that document, they take up the issue of preaching and of homiletics. And one of the things that they are very clear about is that the preaching of the homily is not to is to involve the professionalism, the experience, the time, the holiness of the preacher. They said in that document that what they are looking for is not something which is like the improvisation of the dilettante. Their words. In other words, somebody's just getting up and speaking off the cuff with whatever is in their head. They want not the improvisation of the dilettante, but they said, effective preaching in the professionalism of the preacher who knows what he wants to say and who is always backed up by remote and proximate preparation. So remote preparation is preparation that's going on through the life of the preacher. That happens way before this homily it was prepared. And proximate would be preparation which is specifically aimed at this particular homily, this particular preaching event. Now, it can be easily argued, and a good case can be made, that most preachers have a pretty firm basis in remote preparation. They have, after all, been in seminary. They have a spiritual life. Some of them are giving spiritual direction, giving spiritual talks, reading scripture regularly, doing the divine office, and that there is a preparation, a spiritual life that's going on, which nurtures all the homilies, and from which they can speak. And therefore, some preachers then who do preach impromptu, who do preach off the cuff, who do preach, as the document says, the improvisation of the dilettante, will argue that they are speaking from a certain experience and that they're able to speak in this way. Proximate preparation, however, is a different matter, and that document specifically states that it needs to have both remote and proximate preparation. And this is what Pope Francis is referring to in Evangelii Gaudium when he says the preacher who does not prepare is being spiritually dishonest, who's not living, he says, up to his responsibilities, the charge that the church, the commission that the church has given him to preach preparedly and well for a specific targeted congregation. So when he speaks, saying about the preacher who does not prepare, he's not speaking about remote preparation, but rather proximate. So how, for a daily homily, does a preacher do proximate preparation? What is intended? We do know for the Sunday homily, there's this horizontal preparation, which is meant to go through several days. And I give an example in another video that I posted, a step-by-step example of how that would be done. But that's clearly something that could not be done for a daily homily. Well, one alternative, of course, is a preparation the evening before. The evening before, the preacher spends some time doing a lectio on the text, maybe looking up something, doing a kind of mini studio. So in other words, it is like and it's like the elongated preparation for the Sunday homily, but done in a one sitting, and which still involves the steps of contemplo, studio, and predico. In this way, one way to understand this is that the preparation of the daily homily becomes a spiritual practice. As one would do one prayer, as one would do the rosary, as one would do the divine office. The preparation of tomorrow's text is a spiritual practice meant to deepen the soul, the life of the priest, and then he shares that and he tailors that to the specific congregation. So that's one way. Recently, a couple of years ago, the Aquinas Institute of Theology, which offers doctorates in preaching and has done considerable amount of work, and they sponsor a Great Preachers Award, and they run seminars, ran a seminar over a number of days specifically dedicated to the daily homily and what would be their answer, what would be one way of or different ways of handling that. And that seminar offered an alternative to simply preparing in a prayerful way the night before. Here's what they recommended. They said, the way to look at the daily homily is not to look at it as six day, Monday through to Saturday as six separate homilies, and then we have the Sunday homily, so that the preacher, if he's alone in a parish, is preaching 7 homilies a week. The way to look at it, they said, is to think of all of the daily homilies from Monday to Saturday as one homily, that the texts are continuo, they are continuing, they grow on from each other, and that what the preacher can do is to ahead of time look at all of the readings from the Monday through the Saturday and see where they sort of start and where they lead to, and knowing that he is dealing likely with the same group, because daily communicants are daily communicants after all, and so the same group is coming through, and so therefore he doesn't have to give everything at once. He can, if he looks at all of the texts as one kind of larger reading, then he can start his message on one day, he can go to the next day, he can continue, he can refer back to what he said yesterday, he can look forward to the day after that, and so on. Even if the preacher is alternating, so a pastor with an associate pastor, they're alternating, still the preacher can do this. He can think about, well, I know I'm going to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and so here's what I talk about, and I know what I'll talk about Wednesday, and I know what I'll talk about Friday, and on Wednesday I can refer back, even though I didn't preach on the Tuesday, I can refer back to that text, and so on, and in that way have a unified pearl message. Bishop Butner likes to talk about every homily has a pearl, single message, a unified single message which really runs through the whole week. So in this way, you have single a single homily, and so that particular seminar recommended that preachers prepare a week or so in advance for a whole week and have those ideas ready, and then ready to go. This is interestingly enough connected to one of the ideas that David Orisman, who is a teacher of preaching in Canada, in his book From Gospel to Sermon, he is speaking primarily about, again, the Sunday homily, but he advocated that preachers take a holistic approach to this. So he said, for example, before the new liturgical year begins, that the preacher go off on a retreat for the weekend and read in one single setting the gospel that's going to be for the whole next year. And then, so he gets the sense of the overarching themes. He gets the sense of the particular focus of the homily, of the gospel, the particular message, and so that when he preaches throughout the year, he is able to kind of look ahead to things. He can mention in his homily, you're going to hear in an upcoming Sunday Mass about this, which connects to what we're talking about today. He can make sure that his homily and his pearl connects to the larger themes and pearls that come out of the gospel. So in the same way, the preacher can do this for the daily homily, taking the daily homilies, all 6 of them, as one unit, and which he is now uh, bringing the congregation through that unit, referring back and forth, going forward throughout the week, so that that preparation is going on, and then his Sunday homily preparation is going on, which means he's preparing in any one week he's preparing 2 homilies at one time rather than 7